Hey all, so I wanted to talk a bit about a really interesting show that I think has never been properly given all of the credit or fun that it's been earned, as it were. So let me backtrack a little bit and give you a bit of background. The television series Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency is based on a series of novels by Douglas Adams. Now, Douglas Adams is better known for writing the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, but this one is a bit more on the conventional side, in that it's a series of mystery novels, whereas Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, as much as I love it, I completely read through that entire series by the time that I was 16. So it had a really special place in my heart because I was going through some tough stuff when I was 15, 16 years old. And I turned to that series as a means to kind of get through a lot of it. I just, sunk in and started reading and had a lot of fun. So as a result, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency has a special place in my heart as a series, not as a book. I haven't read the books yet, but simply because it has the same sense of humor, and it has the same feel around it. Now, it's important to kind of distinguish this because there are two adaptations. The first adaptation stars Stephen Mengen and Darren Boyd. And in it, Gently has a more conventional office space. Stephen Mengen plays, or Mangan, I think it's Mengen, but anyway. He plays the main character of Dirk Gently, and they have a kind of Holmes and Watson style relationship. They only ever produced 4 episodes in only one season. Now, given each one is basically part of a book, and you get an entire mystery encapsulated in one episode, so everything is episodic. You don't have the two-parter thing. I'll get into that in a minute. But with this one, it really felt more like a proper series. It had a good feel to it. The actors were good. It all took place in Britain, so that felt right, given that Douglas Adams was British. And everything just kind of had the right feel to it. But it got nixed after so much time. It was originally produced for ITV Studios, or by ITV Studios, for BBC Wales specifically, and it was filmed in Bristol. And I loved it. From the very first episode I saw, I loved it. I thought it was a really good adaptation. It had a wonderful sense of humor, and the resolutions were delightfully absurd. And you would just come around to this really fun conclusion to whatever the mystery was. Then that gets us into Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. Now, that series was produced in 2016 and adapted for television by Max Landis. Max Landis is the reason why I don't like the second version, the second incarnation. This particular version, well, I'll sort of talk about the elephant in the room first before I get into the second version. Max Landis produced films like Chronicle, American Ultra, Victor Frankenstein, and at the time that the series came out, in 2016, he was producing both Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency and also a series called Channel Zero that I think was going to be something akin to the Twilight Zone, basically. And then Me Too happened. And when I say then Me Too happened, I don't mean that as a bad thing. I mean this as a really good thing. Because Landis was apparently pretty bad in a lot of ways. And that's putting it mildly. In December 2017, he was accused of sexual assault by a former coworker. And very quickly, a lot of other people who worked with him in various capacities over the years stepped forward and said, yeah, he was pretty bad about this, and they just... So, as the Me Too movement was just stepping up into full gear, they finally just said, well, yeah, he's like this, and unfortunately, by that time, his show, the Holistic Detective Agency, was on its second season, and it went away overnight, and a lot of that was because it relied so heavily on Max Landis's writing. And, you know, Landis, given, is a very prolific writer and creator. He is listed as a screenwriter, director, producer, and comic book writer. So he has a lot of credits to his name. He's also the son of John Landis, who is an exceptional director and has made all kinds of amazing films from, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, American Werewolf in London, and I think also American Werewolf in Paris. I think he came back for that sequel. And, of course, The Blues Brothers, and he also directed the Thriller video with Michael Jackson, and there's all kinds of problems with that one, but we won't go into that because that's a whole other matter. But just looking at his work on Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, I have issues with the direction he took it in. First off, he set it entirely in the United States, even though the main character is British. He decided to cast Elijah Wood, who I guess must have been like a childhood friend growing up in Hollywood or something. And mind you, Elijah Wood at this point is getting on in years, but he was still playing a young bachelor living in the world on his own. Yeah. And in real life, the guy's been married for like a couple decades now. So it's problematic on a few levels there. But there are other issues that I have to bring up with Max Landis's writing style on this. For one, Landis has some different psychological issues. One being dysgraphia, and I'm not shaming him for having any kind of issues like that. And another is cyclothymia, or themia. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's a mental disorder that involves periods of symptoms of depression and periods of symptoms of hypomania. These symptoms, however, are not sufficient to be a major depressive episode or a hypomanic episode. So in other words, it's kind of related to bipolar disorder, but not quite as serious. Anyway, a lot of people have bipolar disorder, including a lot of really good friends of mine, and my own brother has dysgraphia, and it's one of the reasons he got into computers, because you don't need quite as many fine motor skills for writing when you're typing. So that was something he could do. That was a way he could work around his disability. And over time, his handwriting has gotten better, but it was a good skill that he could develop sort of out of the gate, as it were. But yeah, Max Landis's writing style specifically for this one was a very problematic and perspective. And I'll tell you why. It tends to focus on the fact that these characters have insane impulses, whims, or ideas that lead them to just do things that have no explanation, and then have it all work out and turn out to be the right thing to do. You follow me? So it says that these people in the show, like Dirk Gently and certain other characters, can run around doing whatever they want, and basically the universe, because they're in tune with the universe, it'll be okay. So they don't have to, say, take medication, because there's nothing actually wrong with them. And it kind of goes on like this through both series. It's kind of a denialist perspective, where it says if you have a mental illness, there's actually nothing wrong with you. You should just give in to your whims and see what happens. And that's very problematic for a lot of people where, for instance, they might close off and not be able to function. And given the number of people in this country, in the United States, who have a mental illness or disorder of some kind, or something that that can affect their senses in certain ways, you can't just tell people, oh, you don't really need medication. True story, back when I was in college, there was a homeless drifter who was a Vietnam vet, and as soon as he got kicked out of an asylum because the asylums were just dumping people at that time, and they just regularly tried to dump people out no matter how severe they were. I had a housemate at one point who had severe bipolar disorder and would go on these rips and tears and be constantly spinning her wheels and going off her meds, which would then mess with her system a lot. So you can imagine what sharing a house with someone like that is like. And on top of that, she never did her chores. You know, we had a whole chore roster made up, and nothing ever got done by her. So, yeah. And this was someone who made messes and left messes for other people to clean up, and then tried to dissuade blame. So it can get really messed up when you're living with someone like that. Now imagine living with someone like that who is constantly saying they don't need their medicine. And this is medicine that helps the person function. So that's kind of part of the problem here. When you have media that endorses this perspective, it's very problematic. One particular character that I had a real problem with this in regards to was Bart, played by Fiona Dourif, who, okay, first off, all of the actors in this show are made to look like they are incredibly young. So Bart specifically looks like a little girl. The way that they have her dressed and made up. They make her look like she's some destitute little girl. Other characters like Ken, who goes along with Bart on a lot of things after he's kidnapped by her, he looks incredibly young, as if he could be a child. So he has a very young-looking face. And a lot of actors in this show end up looking exceptionally a lot younger than they are, and I think that was one of the reasons why they cast Elijah Wood as well as for star power. So this one really got on my nerves because not only did you have this really absurd anti-pharmacological issue where, like, it was very sub rosa, discouraging people who have any kind of mental illness or sensory issue from taking their medication. And people who don't take their medication, it's like, yeah, you can manage it, but taking medication, even at a lower dose, does make it a lot easier. I've seen this with a lot of different kinds of people. I don't tell everyone to go on pills. I'm not someone who encourages that a lot, like a daily dose or whatever. But I do encourage people to, trust that medicine is medicine and that it's not, necessarily going to harm you. But I talked about how you have like maybe two-parters occasionally in some shows. Like, for instance, I'm watching Farscape right now, a show that I absolutely loved and adored back when it first came on. Well, Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, as created by Max Landis and adapted for TV and everything, was a fully realized multi-episode season arc. So every episode was part of this larger story arc where nothing would make sense until the last couple of episodes. And this was back before people were really getting into binging shows. I mean, given this was around 2016, so people were binging shows, but not on BBC America. They wanted to get into a show and have a program like that where people would binge watch programs like that. But here's the problem. They didn't tell people that. Like The Walking Dead at the time was really big. And they didn't tell people, oh yeah, Well, they did kind of tell people that The Walking Dead is this multi-episode arc where you follow these characters and stuff that isn't resolved in the first couple episodes is going to get resolved later down the road, and we're going to have some carryover, and eventually things are going to get resolved. So, as a result, watching the episodes of the 2016 version of the show was absolutely infuriating because it was so tiresome. It was so gritty. It was so depressing. And so often things didn't really work out for the better. So you didn't feel good or like anything was resolved in a satisfactory manner. Even by the time you finally got around to, say, the final episode of a season. So I'll just sum up the first season for you and then the second season because they played out very differently. In the first season, you have basically what amounts to a large knot involving time travel. And this guy in the 19th century figures out time travel by accident because he's experimenting with electricity in different ways. And he ends up becoming a multimillionaire, but he's as every generation's version of his son. So the next generation has him, but it's his older self as pretending to be his son, and later his grandson, and things like that. And it just keeps going like that. There's an entire cult, and they go around killing people. And this is the introduction to these characters as we're going through. You have an entire situation, kind of like the time heist in Avengers Endgame, where you have to go back through the previous adventures that you had and redo everything. So, kind of Back to the Future Part 2 also, where you're going back through everything that you went through before, and this time you're redoing it. Same as, certain plot elements in Bill and Ted where they had to go back through things. Anyway. So beyond all that, you have this really insane plot where you don't get any resolution on it, and it turns out to be time travel. And none of it really has to do with the Dirk Gently books by Douglas Adams. That's part of the problem. You've taken the concept and abandoned it. In the Stephen Mangan version, it was really good. He would paint over a wall in his office, and he would wait for it to dry, and then write on it with markers, basically like a whiteboard, so that he could, write down all of the clues, all of the distinct things that are working through his caseload right now, and trying to figure it out. And it works. It's actually fun. And one episode is one mystery. You're not getting carried over from one episode to the next. Everything is kind of on its own. And the resolutions are satisfying. Now compare that to Max Landis' Dirk Gently. The second season involves some kind of strange child who is able to manifest things from his imagination. Gee, I wonder where Max Landis is getting that idea from. Anyway, so this apparently took place back in the 60s, and so people really loved the song Flying Purple People Eater. So what does he do? He manifests the Flying Purple People Eater there in the town, and it terrifies people, so his parents beg him to make it go away. And so he sends it into this other realm that is basically just for things from his imagination. He creates an entire kingdom with people, and there's all these elements to it, and as you're winding through this series, it is just like, you know what? I don't even care how this gets resolved. It's stupid, it's bizarre, and it's not going to be nearly as satisfying as you hope. And every episode was honestly written just so that you would have some kind of, hanging plot thread from the previous episode that you would get resolved, and then, so everything's a cliffhanger is my point. And when you write something to always be a cliffhanger from one episode to the next, it gets tiresome very quickly, especially when you have characters like Bart just running around and killing people. And I'm pretty sure just because the 2010 adaptation was so loyal, I have a pretty good feeling that Bart probably wasn't part of everything. Bart is a holistic assassin. So, just let that sink in for you. In this case, for this show, for Max Landis' show, holistic just means you do whatever you want and the universe will figure out a way to justify it. And that's kind of part of the problem. Especially when you get into the questions of Max Landis' proclivities and tendency to be sexually aggressive. Yeah. If you're going to try and justify things, you have to kind of do a little bit better than say, oh, well, the universe will work it out somehow. Yeah. And I've seen the episode of Best of the Worst where Max Landis guest stars and they have Macaulay Culkin on there. Yeah. When Macaulay Culkin looks like the more sane and rational one, you have a problem, Max. And that's meaning no disrespect to Max Landis as a person, but I do kind of disrespect him as a writer, because this series was just so bad, and it was not fun. And it made 2 series with a total of 18 episodes. And I watched all of them. I was all set to do a really long spiel where I analyzed every episode and I wrote all about it and discussed some of the different themes and aspects to it. But in the end, I'm like, this really isn't worth it. It's worth a vlog where I'm just talking off the cuff. And to be honest, I kind of stand by that. It's worth watching if you want to devote the time to it, but it's not a healthy show. As I said, it has that sort of surreptitious discouragement for pharmacology. So, like, okay, Elijah Wood's character and his sister's, the character of his sister, have this disease where they have horrible living nightmares of sensory stuff. So, if they feel heat from the sun, it feels like their hand is on fire. So their nerves just go to extreme on impulses. And both their parents are dead, and he used his parents' money. He said that he had this disorder and was getting treatments when really he sunk all that money into a band that went nowhere. And he thought he was going to be a rock star, and then his sister got sick and there was no money for her treatments. And then at the end of the first series, the first season, it's revealed that he actually does have the disorder and it starts kicking up. And it's kind of a comeuppance payback moment, but, at the same time, it's like, that's not satisfying for me. That doesn't make me feel better about any of this. So, I don't like it, and I don't feel good having watched any of these episodes of this series, because it could have been so much better. The entire second series, I think, got cut short simply because of the allegations, and the network was pulling out, and they were saying, you need to wrap this series up, get your last few episodes together, and then pack up your stuff and get out. That was kind of the sense I got of this. As it is, even though the 2010 version of the series only ran for 4 episodes, you can watch those episodes and you'll actually enjoy yourself. You'll feel satisfied. The mysteries work out. So I think you'll get a real kick out of those. Those get a really good rating from me. I'd easily give those a 4 or 5 out of 5. I can't really give them a good solid number, though, just because it is a series, and I generally only apply that score to movies, if you follow. A series has too many episodes that can go one way or the other, so it can be a bit too wonky. A film in itself is a complete encapsulation, and you can have movies in a franchise that themselves might be easier to score. But the 2016 adaptation of Dirk Gently, just watch it if you want to. It's fun-ish on some parts, but you aren't going to feel that terribly satisfied with it, I'm afraid. I think I spent the better part of a week watching all the episodes, and I felt okay with it, but after the first season, it was so emotionally intense. I think I took a week off after spending like 3 days watching this series from season 1. I just took a break because I was like, you know what, I just can't right now. I've got too much from this first season hanging over me, and it's emotionally draining. And when I find something emotionally draining, I don't tend to recommend it. It can either drain you or it can restore you. And if something drains you, it's probably not for the best. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on it. I'm really sorry that that all this stuff happened with these women and Max Landis and everything, and it had to kind of get in the middle of all of this. I'm really sorry that all these women were victimized by Max Landis, because that is awful. And, I don't think anyone deserves that. Let alone to have someone, sort of succeeding in Hollywood and not, have some level of accountability. I think that there are certain levels to which a person can step up. We can't all be Christopher Plummer, but we can try and be Dustin Hoffman. And as I remember, Hoffman did try to say, you know what, I fully admit that might have happened. It might have been very different in my mind, and I'm genuinely sorry. If I remember correctly, I think that was along the lines that he went, where he did genuinely apologize and, tried to say, I can't promise to be different because I'm a very different person from back then, but I definitely am not going to go doing anything like that now. And it was just basically kind of a very self-reflective apology, whereas a lot of times you get the, oh, I didn't intend it that way from a guy. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter how you intended it. It's a matter of how it was interpreted. And, if something's wrong, you need to back off and apologize and not do it again. And, we all kind of do that. We all kind of want to initiate something with someone we're attracted to. But there's a line. There's a line where you're being aggressive and where you need to stop. And where you need to kind of respect the other person and understand that maybe they're not interested in that. Louis C.K. Anyway, that was a bit of an odd tangent, but it's worth kind of bringing up just on the Me Too thing. Because God knows, it's crossing a lot of demographics. So it's kind of hard to talk about without, going into personal issues. A lot of people are disclosing this stuff, and the hard part is that it's so personal and so raw for a lot of people. So, it's difficult to really go into a lot of that. But as for Max Landis, I don't think he should have been attached to Dirk Gently anyway. I think they should have been willing to pass it off to someone else to develop it. Or, barring that, I really wish they would have just gone back and done the Stephen Mangan version from 2010. Kept that one going. But I'm pretty sure Landis was like, no, we need to toss out all these people. We need to do it in America. We need to involve some kind of secret spy organization for no reason. And I'm watching Doom Patrol and really loving that, even though that one is dark and that one leaves a lot of stuff unsatisfied and that one leaves a lot of cliffhangers. I still find that one more satisfying because I see the characters grow over time. And there's also not the, oh, you don't need to take your medication kind of thing. It's like, no, you might need to take medication, but more importantly, there's other ways to resolve stuff. So you actually see the characters grow and change over time. The Max Landis, Dirk Gently, you don't see anything grow over time. And the story arcs are not as satisfying as anything. So it's like you don't care. And that's one of the worst crimes that I think any piece of media in terms of storytelling could do for you or me as people, as the audience, is get us to either the point that we're bored or that it's so contrived that we lost interest. And there's all these twists and turns, and guess what? Nobody cares about where those twists and turns lead because you've done so much to leave all of these threads hanging and not satisfy a single one of them for far too long. You can't leave an audience hanging like that. You have to bring them to some kind of resolution. That's the important thing. People need to feel satisfied for what they're watching. And with that said, I hope you're satisfied with this vlog. If you want to, you can leave a constructive and respectful comment below. I love reading stuff from viewers and whatnot. You're perfectly welcome to like, subscribe, ding the bell, whatever you want to do to give me the thumbs up or whatever. And I would love it if you would donate to my Patreon campaign, username Clara. And until next time, thanks for watching, take care, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.